Welcome to Teaching in Color, the podcast where we empower teachers, redefine education, and amplify voices. Here, we dive into real stories, bold conversations, and the challenges and triumphs of educators making a difference. Whether you're in the classroom, the community, or just here for inspiration, this is your space. Let's talk, let's grow, and let's make change together. This is Teaching in Color. And welcome to Teaching in Color, the podcast where we explore the experiences, challenges, and triumphs of teachers of color. I'm your host, Brandon Jenkins, a first-year Black male teacher, and I'm excited to bring you conversations with educators who are making a difference in our schools today. Today, we have an inspiring episode featuring Natalia Leija, a passionate Latina teacher from Texas. Natalia is a fourth-year teacher, a dog mom, and a first-time mom to a baby boy. She is dedicated to creating a welcoming space for her students to feel safe, respected, and excited about learning every day. Welcome to the show, Natalia.
Hi, thank you for having me, Brandon. This is really
Of course,
exciting.
of course. I know I'm so excited about this podcast episode because I think I really wanted someone who could push some of the topics that we are going to be talking about today and won't be refrain from really speaking the truth and being honest. So thank
Mhm.
you so much for just being here. Okay, we're going to go ahead and jump into our first question. To start us off, can you share a bit about your background and what inspired you to become a teacher?
So I'm actually a resident or a citizen from Mexico. So I came at a very young age. So what inspired me to be a teacher were my previous teachers. I feel like coming from a whole different nationality and starting off school here was really scary because I was already behind. I didn't know how to communicate with my peers, but luckily I had a welcoming teacher that worked really hard to get me to where I am today. And of course, not all of my teachers throughout like my educational career were as welcoming, but the ones that were the ones that inspired me to become an educator.
Really great. And I think we hear um, a lot of students who have that deeper like connection with teachers who made a difference in their lives. And whether it be two or three or just one, I mean, that's a really great story for yourself. I think currently we're seeing that we have a lot of students who are coming from different nationalities and different countries and wanting to be accepted and wanting to understand and know that they have a teacher that is really rooting for them and really going to be invested in them. So, speaking on your experiences, and you talked a little bit about how you came over and you were really wanting someone to be invested in you, and that really inspired you to become a teacher. Um, as a Latina educator, what unique challenges and rewards have you encountered in your teaching career?
I think at the end of the school year, well, I teach pre-K, so
Mhm.
I'm actually transitioning to a new grade level this upcoming year. But for the past 3 years, 4 years, I've been teaching pre-K. So you're their first teacher. Some of these kids have not even been to daycare before, so it's their first time being separated from their parents. And I think instilling like a good connection with them helps them become comfortable with you and be able
Mhm.
to like learning. And so I'm so sorry I derailed from the
No, you're fine.
question. uh so I think it's very important to be able to I'm so sorry.
No, you're
Can you
fine.
ask me the question again?
Yes, yes, I can for sure. And I'll make sure to, if you want,
Yeah.
you okay. So, as a Latina educator, what unique challenges and rewards have you encountered in your teaching career?
There we go, rewards. So I think it's very rewarding to see where they end up at the end of
Hmm.
the school year. And as a Latina educator, I think a part of me also wants to be a little bit more invested in some of their lives. Like throughout the years that I've taught, I have had challenging students and challenging parents, and not necessarily because of their behavior or academics, but more towards their like home life. So I
Hmm.
do want to be an advocate for them in the classroom, but as well as for them to, as well as an advocate for them at home. So
Yes.
what I'm trying to like get with that is providing a safe space for them in the class and having them be excited about learning and having them wanting to come to school kind of takes away from the stress that they receive at home.
Mm.
So I think the challenge for myself as an educator is also trying to create a line between, hey, I'm an educator, I'm going to try to help the best that I can, but I'm not a social worker all the way, so I don't want to overstep my boundaries. So I really have
Yes.
to be, a little bit more, I guess, cautious about how
Yeah.
I say things and how do I communicate with parents and stuff like that. So I think that's one of the challenges that I've had. Luckily, though, even with my students that have a little bit of different backgrounds and a little bit of a more stressful home life, I have been able to communicate with their parents well enough to where we still have some sort of understanding and we still try to work our best to try to get the student to be excited about learning and try to get them to want to come to school because sometimes their life is a little bit too stressful for them and they're little, they don't know
Yeah.
how to communicate their feelings, and that's something we're also trying to teach. So I've been very lucky to have some parents that have been very communicative and have been willing to do what it takes to get their kids where they need to be and making sure their kids are, still safe and enjoy coming to school.
Yeah, for
So
sure. And
I
I
was like, I
mean,
don't even know if I answered your question, but
no, you did. You did and more. And I think that you really bring up a really good point of like making sure to balance yourself and really know that line between, hey, I'm an educator, but I'm also more than an educator, but I also don't want to overstep my own
mhm,
boundaries or the boundaries that are in place. I mean, all of our students, we know our students come from different backgrounds and different things that happen at home. And there's so many outside factors to their overall learning that when they come to school, I mean, you as a teacher, Natalia, you are making a safe place for them and an inclusive space for them that they come to school and they're like, I don't really have to worry about what's at home for the next 8 hours because I know that I have a teacher who is invested in me and who is wanting to make a safe space for me here. So that's really great to hear that you have that kind of power over your classroom. You bring that to your classroom. But I do want to ask a very important question. I mean, those experiences that you just talked about and like communicating with your parents, it's really a powerful experience for yourself. How do you create a welcoming and inclusive environment for your students, ensuring that they do feel safe and respected?
First of all, I start off as like showing them that I want them there. So every
Mhm.
morning we're by the door, we're communicating with them, saying good morning. And throughout the year, I want to make sure they are seen. So I try to be as diverse as I can. Again, they're so little, so exposure is good for them, even though they don't retain anything
Yeah.
all the way. But I try to be as diverse as I can, whether it be with literature, music, food is a great
Yes.
way to get them excited and a little bit more, expand their palette a little bit more with different cultures, as well as I like them to be able to communicate with their peers. So I'm very
Yes.
much about we are a classroom family, we're all going to play with each other, we're all going to communicate with each other. If there's an issue, we're going to resolve it because I don't want them to not want to come to school because they feel like a kid in their classroom is not being very nice to them. A kid in the classroom does not like them. So I feel like I feel like from the start of the year, showing that you care about them and showing kindness and all of those nice traits, not just for yourself, but showing that they can show that to their peers as well, is how you create a welcoming environment for them.
And I think you talk about food, and it's been a running theme on this podcast. I think you've been a person who has brought food into the classroom and like you said to increase their palate and really understand cultural differences, and we've heard from other yes, that food is a universal language, and like it's something that makes people feel good, makes them feel comfortable. And especially for students. I mean, we know that there's so many students who come to school to, I mean, that's their meal for the day. That's breakfast,
Right.
lunch for them. That's all really that they can do, or that they're given. So, creating that opportunity where you can bring food into the classroom, and not only just for them to be sustained, but for them to learn about different cultures as well is
Mhm.
so important. But that perspective was very insightful. Um, can you give an example of how you've integrated these inclusive practices in your classroom? And like you said, I know you bring a lot to the classroom. You know, you bring the food and the cultural differences and the cultural opportunities to the classroom. You talked about how you have them wanting to be in the classroom and wanting to be in a safe space. But what are some of those examples of a time or an opportunity where you brought that inclusiveness into your classroom?
So when we're getting to know each other at the start of the year, I like them to share what they like. So
Hmm.
there's often times where we make like a little graph, like if you like this type of food, if you like for example, if you like pizza and hamburgers, and then we'll add something different on there. Just something that
Yeah.
they're not used to. You see their faces light up and you see them,
Mhm.
oh, hey, I had that with my grandma, or I had that with my
Yeah.
mom the other day. So stuff like that, and as well as during different celebrations that we have throughout the years, even though they're not totally in our curriculum, I
Hmm.
still like to go a little bit. I still like to expose them. Like I said, if they're not retaining as much, but when they get into their upper grade levels, they can be like, "Oh, I already know what this is, or I've learned about this
Hmm.
before, but just not. I didn't know that part, you know." So I like to see what other teachers are doing, and I feel like Instagram and TikTok have been a very like
Hmm.
great way of finding resources. So I found a wonderful teacher from Los Angeles. Her name's Naomi.
Hmm.
Her Instagram handle is Read Like a Rock Star Teaching,
Hmm.
and she has great social studies lessons for people of color. So, for example, they have a very simple but effective lesson for Black History Month. And I like exposing that to my kids, even though
Hmm.
they don't really retain it all the way. Like I said, they still are able to connect because I do have a lot of kids in my classroom that are of color. So it's nice for them to be able to
Yeah.
connect and say, oh, that person kind of looks like me. Same goes for when we're reading
Hmm.
books and we're reading about uh, especially during Christmas time, there's a lot of great books out there for diversity. So whether it is with the food that they make, like one of the books that we had 2 years ago in our curriculum previously, it was one that really focused on tamales, and
Yeah.
tamales is a wonderful food, and some of the kids light up. Like I said, they're like, hey, I've
Hmm.
had that before. I love those. I make those at home. So it's wonderful to be able to make those connections with them, even though they don't understand, and they don't really at this age. They're starting to realize that they're some of them look a little bit different, but we like
Hmm.
to, be able to show them like, hey, it's okay if you're a little bit different. It's okay if you don't do the exact same thing as your peers, because you're special, you're unique. And I think being able to show them that, um, and how I was able to show them that, really helps them grow up and be confident about themselves as they're transitioning into learning a little bit more about themselves and their peers.
And I mean, just those connections go such a long way. I mean, little things like that where you can bring something to the classroom and they can look at something and say, "Hey, I see myself in that. I see myself doing these things." But I think most importantly is knowing that they have a teacher that looks like them and that is represented within their learning. I mean, it makes such a difference. I think my next question for you is really, and this one is going off script a little bit because I really want to gauge your mind on this topic. And I think it's something that we as teachers, teaching and education is a very white female dominated profession. Um, where do you think, or how do you think, yourself in the teaching role, like what can you do to inspire pre-service teachers or aspiring teachers who are female, who are Latina, who are wanting to be in education, but they don't see themselves represented or they don't see a space for them? What can you say to them to really give them hope that they can one day become a teacher, or an educator, or an administrator?
If it's something that you are thinking about doing, I always say go for it because in the end, it doesn't really hurt to try. And
Hmm.
me myself, I wasn't when I started my college career, I wasn't focused on being an educator, and I feel like
Hmm.
that happens a lot with educators.
Hmm.
So I feel like once I started to realize, like, hey, the previous way or the previous route I was going for isn't quite for me. I need to find something else. And I started to take like intro to education classes,
Hmm.
and I fell in love with it. Being able to know that you can make a difference in the littlest ways, the littlest things can
Yeah,
be so impactful for your students. And being able to be in a profession that does make a difference is really rewarding, whether it's I mean, of course, like we could always be a little bit more, rewarded by like
for
our
sure.
pay or and stuff like that. But being able to create those connections with the kids is really wonderful. At the end of the year, you'll miss them so much. And you would wish that you can keep on growing with them, but you always get a fresh start. And every day is different, and I always tell myself, hey, if my classroom is perfect,
Hmm.
it's a little boring. You need a little bit
Yeah.
of chaos in there to make it fun and make it different, because no classroom is the same. And I myself, growing up, I do recall a lot of my teachers being white, and
Hmm.
I think looking back and thinking about the teachers that I had of color, they were really empowering to me, not only because they were in a field where they weren't represented as much, but
Yeah.
they were still working hard and they were still being recognized. I feel like education is a good way to I guess, stepped a little bit out of your comfort zone,
Hmm.
because myself, I'm a very introverted person. So I'm more of a listener than a talker. So this is very out of my comfort zone. But I feel like you do have to be willing to be out of your comfort zone in order to um I guess not elevate your career, but progress. Because
Yeah.
if you don't get out of your comfort zone, you're going to be really stagnant. And I feel like in
Hmm.
education, if you're an educator, you are a lifelong learner.
Hmm.
And if that's something that you love, I would say go for it, even though you are not quite represented all the way. Because at the end of the day, it's it's really going to be empowering, not only to you but to your kids, to your
For
students, to
sure.
be able to see people that look like them, to be inside the classroom. And it's really fun and nice when you hear them say, oh, I want to be a teacher when I grow up.
Hmm.
Because you ask them, oh, why do you want to be a teacher? Oh, because I want to be just like you.
Yeah.
I like you. And it's really that's a way that it's rewarding, because even though the kids are, quite not, they don't quite understand some of
Hmm.
the career choices, it's rewarding to be like, oh, okay, I want to be just like you, Miss Leija. I
Yeah,
like
and
the way
for
your
know
classroom
that it's
looks.
an option for them. Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, it's really nice to see when there's people that have experience some of the same challenges as
Hmm.
you, be in your career field, because you're able to collaborate and you're able to talk about ways that you can influence your classrooms. So I definitely say go for it. It is a little scary, but it is a rewarding career.
I mean, thank you for that because I think there's so many people. I mean, it's different now, where you're seeing new age teachers coming in, and they're from different backgrounds and different nationalities, but it's still a very prominent topic of having teachers of color in the classroom and wanting them there, and not just getting them in there, but having them stay there, like retaining them. Because we see so many teachers of color leaving the profession because of the systematic things that are happening within our education system. So I think I do have a question for you, Natalia. Do you know any information on like DACA or the Dream Act?
So I was a DACA recipient a couple years ago. I was fortunate enough to get my residency, so
Hmm.
I haven't had to renew, but I do know a lot of people that are still on DACA. So I know it's gone through a couple changes, but
Hmm.
essentially what it allows you to continue your education, to start working, if you were not from here. Essentially it's given to kids or to young adults or to whoever that came at a young age that didn't really have a say
Hmm.
to see that they wanted to come here. um s- um so it's a great opportunity. However, it needs to be a little bit reformed, in my opinion.
Hmm.
There's a lot of things wrong with our immigration system, I feel like,
Hmm.
but don't want to get too much into detail with that. But
No, yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's a very broad and touchy topic. But
Hmm.
um, essentially, it provides people, undocumented people, um, the ability to work and to continue their education, even though they don't have, a residential status.
Hmm.
Um,
And I mean, I think your residency itself, was that like pre college? Was that after college? What was that kind of time, that process for you?
Ooh, that was I got my residency, I think, right after I graduated college.
Hmm.
It was a multiple years long issue. Like I said, I was a DACA recipient before, but I was fortunate enough to get my residency through
Hmm.
my parents. So what they did is they had to go through my grandpa, and it's a whole bunch of different steps. And
Yeah.
after you feel like you're at the end of the finish line, they add the next
Hmm.
step. So it's
Yeah.
constantly changing. Since it's constantly changing, you have to be on top of your paperwork and all of that good stuff. But I was a DACA recipient from, I guess, since I was 15 to almost when I graduated college. So it was a couple years that I had to renew, and it's expensive. So it's
Hmm.
very unfortunate when there's people out there that get it once and they're not fortunate enough to be able to renew, because it is a um, I guess, step that you have to take in order to
Yeah.
continue to have your paperwork. Even for your residency, there's people that are still that they can apply but they choose not to because of money issues. So I was very fortunate enough to be able to get my residency and start visiting where I came from, because it was years, I feel like, from when I came over here, and I couldn't go back, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, and I bring all this up to say, I mean, you make some really great points, and I think a lot of people are going through, or have been recipients of DACA. But I say this because I teach fourth grade, and I remember, um, I was going to Washington, D.C. to talk about policy reform and like educational reform. And there was a conversation that was had about those recipients and people and college students who are wanting to become educators, but they're having to go through all of these hoops, and it's a whole process. But I remember coming back to my classroom, and I was telling my students, because they were very excited about it. They want to know all your business, right?
Mhm.
So I told them like I was gone for 3 days. I went to Washington D.C. They had all of these questions, and I told them what I went for. And I remember one student in particular was like raised his hand and asked, "Well, will I be able to go to college?" And I was like, "Well, why wouldn't you?" Like I it really was a puzzling question for me. I was like, "Well, why wouldn't you?" And he was like, "Well, I don't have like any papers, or I'm not like a citizen." And I was like, "That's a great question." And like I said, we talked about this for a little bit at the conference. And it was just really eye-opening because for me it's education should be as you know, as educators, education should be for everyone. Like you said, we're lifelong learners and educators ultimately, but education should be granted to every single child. And so for him to ask that question and really wonder and puzzle, because I know that he would want that, but there's that loophole, there's that block, there's that barrier stopping from that. I mean, what do you think should be the first step in like creating those opportunities for students like that?
I feel like you just have to always tell them like, hey, you can do anything that you want to do,
Hmm.
it is going to be a little bit difficult, but you definitely can do it. And it goes back to showing them that there's like people that are going through or have gone through the same experiences as them, to be able to show them that, hey, like you can triumph and you can do what you set your mind to do. And just providing them with, again, that same exposure, and hopefully get them to continue their education. It's really just being supportive and being a good I guess role model for your students, because it all goes back to seeing people that are just like them in the classroom, and that exposure of them being able to see themselves um in the in in whatever they decide to do. And I think just I know a lot of campuses, or at least here in Texas, they're very like avid oriented. So
Hmm.
I feel like that also has something to do with it, being able to show them like, hey, these are places that you can go to, um, and the whatever you want to learn, you can learn it. You can continue learning it. And I feel like just I don't know, I'm derailing again. I got nervous.
You're fine. No,
No, just
that's
like I
but
said,
you're
just
really onto
exposing
a great
them.
start.
Yeah, just exposing them and being able to show them like, hey, even though it's going to be a little bit different, you can still do it. I would set my mind to it and continue to work on it. And just, I guess, yeah, I'm so sorry.
No, you're good.
You
I
have.
think that's that. You're fine. No, I think that's great because, like I said, it's just all about representation. They see their teachers who look like them and want to be invested in them. They're willing to go that route. And like you said, it just do it. Like there's all these processes and it will be hard, but ultimately, everything will pay off.
No, yeah, and thinking back at it, I was the same way, like especially in high school when everybody was
Hmm.
saying where they wanted to go and
Hmm.
what they wanted to do. I was really, like I said, education wasn't my first choice. So I was pretty clueless
Yeah.
to what I wanted to do, because it was hard to see myself in any of their shoes growing up, And I was always wanting to leave Houston when I was
Hmm.
applying for colleges, but being a DACA recipient made it a little bit difficult, because again, you don't get to apply to those same scholarships. You don't get to, there's a lot of stuff that you are not able to apply for, to help you go to school. And I feel like it's changed a little bit, because um, thinking back at it when I was applying, it was years ago. So it definitely is continuing to change, and
Yeah.
I see some stuff that becomes a little bit more accessible, but it's still really difficult. And I was in their shoes, like, but to hear it come from a fourth grader is
Hmm.
insane.
Yeah.
Because I think they're so young to think so negatively about like their
Hmm.
experiences later on. So it's kind of heartbreaking to hear that.
Yes.
Because when I went through that, probably I was, like I said, I was in high school, so I was like 16, 17. So
Hmm.
coming from a fourth grader, being already knowing and realizing in their eyes that they have different challenges is so eye-opening to me. Um, but it is
Yeah.
possible, and you just have to work a little bit harder, but it will all pay off in the end.
It was very tough to hear that and know that I mean just to know that that's already their perspective, and especially for uh, such a bright student, just to hear that. But I think, the advice that you're giving is very invaluable, Natalia. But before we wrap up, do you have any like big projects or initiatives coming up that you would like to share with our listeners? And where we can find and follow your work online? It can be as big as you want, as small as you want. I know that the work that you do is amazing. So is there anything that you are working on that you would like to share?
So for the upcoming year, I see the impactfulness that TikTok and Instagram and all of the online platforms have done for different educators and
Mhm.
different professions out there. Um uh Again, like I said, I'm much of an introvert, so this is going to be really out of my comfort zone, but I do have an Instagram that I'm going to be working on this upcoming school year. Uh the past couple years I've used it as a platform mostly for my parents,
Mhm.
because I started teaching right after COVID. So the it was different. The parents couldn't come and see what we were doing inside the classroom. So I use Instagram as an open platform for them to see what we were doing, all of the fun activities that we were coming across the school year. It was hard to keep, or at least for me, it's been really difficult to keep up with it,
Yeah,
but that is something that I'm going to work towards, especially now that I'm going to be transitioning to a different grade this upcoming school year. So I'm going to be learning alongside with the students. Um,
yeah, of
so I do want to share out my teacher Instagram. Like I said, it was mostly for the
course.
parents, and this year it's going to be transitioned into being a little bit more of an open platform. But
Mhm.
it is my ads on Instagram is Leija's Little Learners, and again, I see a lot of teachers post their stuff on there on Instagram or TikTok, and they blur out the kids' faces. And the only
Mhm.
reason that, for privacy reasons, the only reason my students' faces aren't blurred out is because they have media release forms,
Yes.
and that's the only reason they're, like I said, because it was for my parents. So I
Yeah.
want them to be able to see their kid enjoying and having fun at school. So it's the reason their faces aren't blurred out. But the upcoming school year, since it's going to be transitioned to a different grade level and the kids are going to be a little bit older, I am going to start blurring out their faces just because it's not going to be completely navigated towards just my parents.
Yes, yes. And thank you for bringing that up because anyone listening, social media influencers and people who are sharing their content online, yes, media release forms are a very great way for you to make sure that parents are in the loop about you doing that. But thank you for letting us know that. And I'll make sure to put your at so that people can view your work and share and show support. But we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Like I said, thank you so much, Natalia, for your insights and your experiences. In summary, today, here are some just key takeaways that we had from our conversation. Really is the importance of creating inclusive environments for students, strategies for integrating representation and cultural inclusion in one classroom or in multiple classrooms, and then the impact that dedicated and inclusive educators like Natalia can have on their students. So, thank you again, Natalia, for joining us on Teaching in Color. Your dedication to creating safe and welcoming spaces for your students is truly inspiring. And I'm sure our listeners have really gained a lot from your insights. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode. Be sure to follow us on social media and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. Until next time, stay inspired and keep making a difference in your classroom. Thank you so much, guys, and see you next time.